Right, this is cultural differences in international trade that we will be talking about. Before we get started, I want to go through the agenda of the things we will be talking about today. So, first, I want to introduce myself and who I am, and then I want to give you guys the reasoning on why I chose to do Japan. Take a look a little bit at Japan's culture. Then we'll do some compare and contrasting against the USA versus Japan. And then also we'll wrap this up with how does this help with procurement, considering that's the class we're taking. And then after that, we'll go ahead and summarize everything up so we can get a good look at everything in an overview. First, I want to formally introduce myself. My name is Drevon Hughes, and this presentation is for the Principles of Procurement class that I'm in currently. Today is going to be the 21st of November 2025, and I want to discuss basically, some of the cultural difference or the impact, some of the impact that the cultural difference has on procurement and why I think Japan is a good option for this. I think Japan is a very good option for this because it is a major city that we do a lot of global trading with. They are just a global supplier in general. We could talk from automotives, electronics, manufacturing, just internationally. This is a very well-known country that is good for global supply, especially with the politics and everything. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to talk about Japan. And when you work in procurement, especially internationally, understanding the culture is just as important as understanding the rest of everything else, like the process or like the electronics, automotives, So to understand more about their culture is very important. So, all right, why did I choose Japan? I chose Japan mainly because, like I said, they have a strong business reputation in general, just from like getting things transported, being reliable. A lot of the vehicles that they make that we use are very reliable. I thought this was just a really good choice. Many companies in the US also rely on Japanese suppliers, for manufacturing standards and everything because they're just so extremely high and they're just very good with what they do. But what really stands out about Japan is how different their communication style and business culture are compared to the US. Those differences can have a major impact on procurement negotiations. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to explore those culture aspects and see how they would affect business relationships. All right. To first even start this off, Japan does have a lot of different cultural characteristics that make it a very, very good business area in general. One of the major ones is the power distance. So Japan tends to have a clear hierarchy within companies. So decisions usually come from senior management, not from lower level employees. So when you're doing like negotiating or talking to someone, you may notice that the person you're talking to isn't necessarily the person who will make like the final decision. And another good cultural factor that they have is uncertainty avoidance. And with this, Japan is a country that really values predictability. They like plans, they like things to know, they like things to be known and, have long term relationships. They make good decisions and they also do things in harmony, like they work together um, whenever they come up with like an idea, they make sure to work together. And Japan is also is very collectivist culture. So, in this terms, this means people think more in terms of rather group rather than individual. They think as a whole rather than, U.S., but we'll get into that in a minute. But then there's the view of time too there. So Japan depends to blend both structured and relationship based timings. Meetings may start at a time, but business conversations usually do not jump immediately into contracts. Relationship building has to come first in Japan's culture. And like I said, another thing was the harmony. Um, keeping good harmony and being very direct about things instead of trying to save face or trying to like hide from embarrassment. They do like things very upfront in Japan. So now I just want to compare a couple things. So we're going to compare the US culture practices from the Japan cultural practices, because they are very different and can create some misunderstandings if you're not prepared. So the communication style here in the US is very, I would say, very, very direct, especially business wise. Um, you know, so we say what we mean, and we can expect straightforward answers. In Japan, people are a little bit more nice, polite, and they might say things like, we'll consider, or that might be a little difficult instead of just saying outright no. Um, but if you don't understand the difference, you could walk away thinking they agreed with when they actually didn't. Another one that is different is the individualism versus collectivism between the U.S. and between Japan. So, like I said, um, in the U.S., individuals' achievements, quick decision making, and personal accountabilities are common. In Japan, decisions are usually made collectively, often requiring internal meetings and team approval over time. This means that the negotiation process can take longer with Japanese suppliers, so you got to make sure that you have a lot of patience whenever it comes to making a negotiation with people from Japan. Um, Another one is the uncertainty avoidance. So with the U.S. companies, we tend to be okay with flexible plans, change as they go. Usually most Japanese places are typically like they don't like change. They like to keep things consistent over time. So that is a major difference um, with our culture compared to theirs for sure. How does culture affect procurement? I think culture affects procurement. I think in a gazillion different ways. I mean, some of the basic ones I have on here is that they help understand things, improve trust, helps maintain relationships, less issues. To dive into that, understanding culture practices isn't just interesting, it's very essential. If you need to negotiate anything, you got to make sure you understand other people's cultural expectations rather than just the US's or wherever you might be from. You don't want any miscommunication, any damaged relationships, or altogether lose a deal just because, you didn't understand somebody else's culture. For example, if you don't know what Japanese suppliers avoid direct confrontation, you might misinterpret their politeness as an agreement. Or if you push too hard, too quick, they may see that as disrespectful because, like I said before, people in the US typically are a little bit more aggressive than people in Japan. Researching the culture can help you, build trust with them. Avoid offending people. We don't want anybody to be offended. Communicate better. Negotiate things better. You might even get a better deal. Gets rid of the risk of misunderstandings, and it could most likely build a relationship with the company for a long time. In procurement, relationships matter just as much as contracts. So, taking the time to understand a supplier's culture makes you more effective and more professional buyer over time. All right, what I've learned over this project is that procurement is not just about like buying things or finding like cheap, people to buy things from. It's about also understanding different people and understanding their cultures. So, with Japan, that taught me that business success can depend on patience, harmony, long-term thinking. I learned how important face-saving behavior is and how indirect communication can just be just as meaningful as direct communication if you know how to interpret it correctly. Overall, this research showed me that the cultural awareness is a key skill in supply chain and procurement. The more you understand the people you're working with, the more successful your business relationships will be. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to me and my presentation today. Hopefully, you guys can take something from this and be able to respect other people's cultures and boundaries. And not also that this can help for in a business perspective, like I said before, with miscommunications. Maybe saying something ignorant that you didn't mean that way. Just a whole different. There's a whole different ways this could go, and also with procurement, it all just goes hand in hand together. So some of the sources I used were Hosfed Insights, Cultural Dimensions for Japan, Quintessential Japanese Business Culture Guide, and Japan External Trade Organization. Once again, I want to say thank you for everybody, and I hope this presentation helps highlight why culture understanding is so important in procurement.